Is there a good success rate for anxiety and depression specifically?
It's really so good that we can't even hang on to our clients. Up until very recently, the food industry has been very successful at dodging the bullet. So, what happens to the part of the brain that's supposed to be producing all of these positive moods that we're capable of experiencing? Nothing good.
Is there a possibility that we can reverse this downward mental health trajectory?
We could have done it decades ago.
Hey, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. So, we have 5 mood centers in the brain. One helps us feel calm, one helps us handle stress, one gives us energy and motivation, one helps us to feel emotionally stable and calm and content. When any of these centers run low, like a gas tank on empty, we can experience what today's guest calls false moods. Julia Ross is a psychotherapist and the author of 3 best-selling books, including The Mood Cure. She's a world leader in the use of nutritional therapy for the treatment of mood problems, eating disorders, and addictions. It's undeniable that we're experiencing a mental health epidemic on a global scale now, with kids and teens being some of the most vulnerable. We need immediate solutions. And if you can believe it, we've actually had the missing piece to our mental health crisis for decades. Julia Ross is going to tell you all about it in this episode, and I really hope you enjoy. Thank you so much, Julia, for joining us today. This is a dream come true for me. I truly feel full circle because I read your book, I don't know, maybe 7 years ago, and it changed the trajectory of what I wanted to do professionally in my holistic health practice. And it changed, the way that I approached mental health and thought about the way that our moods work. So I'm just so honored and grateful that you can come and share your wisdom with us today. So thank you so much for being here.
Well, you're welcome.
Why don't we just kick off the call by let's explain what the bad mood epidemic is. Would you mind walking us through? Because you talk about that in your book, The Mood Cure. You talk about we're in a bad mood epidemic. Can you explain to us what that is?
Well, let's start with uh, the prior few million years. Pretty much everybody now has forgotten or never experienced a normal mood. But I'm old enough to remember the 50s. And you couldn't walk down the street anywhere without people whistling or even singing. If you've ever heard of a barbershop quartet, there really were such things in New York City and all the big cities. There were these guys standing on the corner crooning and harmonizing, and nobody thought a thing about it. It was just normal. That doesn't mean that we didn't have a variety, in our presentations and experiences of our moods. We had bad moods, but that was the exception. Ordinarily, we were very upbeat, can do, funny. That was my experience in this country, um, in California, Southern California, Northern California, whenever we traveled, as a family. So I don't want to try and paint too rosy a picture. We're still part of the human race. We have problems, major problems with each other and so forth. But I do want to create, the reality that we experienced, unless, we were starving or, there was a war, at hand, our natural mood was positive. So it's very hard for me to talk about the bad mood epidemic without mentioning what I think is the cause of the shift. That cause has to do with our diet. So really, that was the only thing that shifted. And there's a lot of attention now about the problems with our diet shift causing obesity epidemics, starting in 1995. So we've been aware of major problems, and up until very recently, the food industry has been very successful at dodging the bullet,
Yes.
continuing to seem like our friend, with all its adorable child-targeted packaging and so forth. So the problem with the diet that we've been suffering from since really mid 70s, has resulted in a kind of malnutrition, general malnutrition. So what happens to the part of the brain that's supposed to be producing all of these positive moods that we're capable of experiencing? Nothing good. So let me say, first of all, that the nutrient whose loss is the most responsible for the deterioration of our mood and our health in general is protein. And the word protein really means first, primary. Pro means primary. So it is the food that we need most in order to create all of the body's and brain's tissues. Protein is composed of 20 amino acids, and each one of them is like a celestial planet in terms of what it's capable of doing. And when you think of all the millions of kinds of tissues in the body, um, how they can be primarily built with 20 amino acids is extraordinary. So as we became addicted to carbohydrate, which is a very, very easy thing to accomplish, especially with the new sugars starting in the 70s, high fructose corn syrup, for example, as primary example, um, the brain stopped getting adequate fuel. The proteins, the specific amino acids that are required to provide good moods simply were not available in adequate amounts, and increasingly so. So when we have a diet that's almost entirely carbohydrates and damaged fats, there's a price to pay. And our mood has been um, steadily deteriorating, drastically deteriorating, and not only in adults, but in teens and in children. So I think we're going to get into the details of which nutrients are required to construct a good mood at some point. And it sounds like a daunting task. You know, people are going to be yawning and wondering about when the lecture on neurochemistry is going to be over, but they're going to be very surprised at how little food of the right sort is needed to restore our capacity for happiness and joy and excitement.
Just kind of talking about neurotransmitters, I'm kind of curious for people who maybe have friends or family who are experiencing chronic depression and anxiety. I know that's why I got into this field. It was family members and friends who had depression, and I just remember feeling like I'm just at a loss. I mean, I studied for maybe 7, 8 years until I came across your work. But, I just remember I deeply remember the feeling of, I do not know where to go. I want so desperately to help these people, and I just remember that kind of, like, just feeling like I'm at the end of myself, and I just don't know where to go from here, and I know a lot of people listening might feel that way about themselves or about a family member. So I'm just curious, could you kind of explain to us, I know that you've had lots of anxiety and depression cases that you've worked with over the decades. Is there a pretty good success rate for these people working with amino acids and the way that you do nutrient therapy and that you teach? Is there a good success rate for anxiety and depression specifically?
It's really so good that we can't even hang on to our clients. We do amino trialing. So our first session is assessment. And we talk to them about what's going on and what they're experiencing. We look at the results of their questionnaires. And then at that point, we have a very good idea of what we can do for them. And I can't even remember the last person where we said, you know, I think in your case, we won't be able to do anything for you. There have been
Mm.
people where we couldn't do everything that they needed, and we knew that from the beginning. But even that is the exception. So people come in, and whether they're coming because of negative moods, emotional eating, or addiction, we have a good idea right from the start. And so we schedule a second meeting, at which point they have received an amino trialing kit. So samples of all of the aminos that we might need to trial in our Zoom sessions. At this point, 90% have positive experiences, and their symptoms either reduce dramatically or stop. If they've reduced dramatically but not completely, then we know it's a dosing issue and we raise the doses. And then we make sure that they know how to eat enough protein so that they won't need to stay on the individual amino acid supplements for forever. Depending on their own physiology, they may need 3 months, they may need 6 months, they may need, in the longest case, a number of our addicted clients have needed the supplementation in addition to a high protein diet for a year.
A whole year, Julia. Imagine that. It's such a short amount of time when we're talking about these lifelong afflictions
Yes,
and
at
things
10
like
years on
addiction.
SSRIs,
Oh,
average.
yeah. Oh, gosh. Oh, yeah. So, wow. So you just said about 90% success, and I love that. I love
Within
that.
weeks, within weeks. We don't have to wait for it. I had a trainee who was a PhD psychologist, marvelous person, and her clients loved her. So, she saw them long term, but she could see that, there were certain mood states that all this wonderful therapy wasn't getting rid of. And she took my course and she started to submit cases to me. And I could see that her clients were better, but their scores, they still had symptoms. They were less severe symptoms, and so what I finally realized was that she was giving them such low doses that it was just taking them, 6 months to get the complete benefits. And I had to work with her for another 3 months until she got used to giving people higher doses from the start and monitoring them quickly and raising doses quickly. And then she sent me several cases where she got them all from average scores of 10 on all the symptoms to zeros within 3 months.
10 being the most severe symptom and then 0 being none at all. I don't know about you, Julia, but I don't know any other modality that treats the whole person in this way, and also that isn't dependent. You're not getting dependent on these things. They're there to support you when you need them.
And there also aren't side effects.
That's another really big point that we should bring up, is that free of side effects. I mean, of course, any supplement, if you take too much or if it's not the right fit for you or you're mixing it with the wrong medication, sure. You talk about all of that in your book. But that's the beautiful thing, is this is it's a food-based supplement. And I think that's what a lot of people listening to this podcast are coming for, is alternatives. And that's why I think it's such an incredible thing to talk about. And I'm never going to shut up about this. I know that you haven't yet. Kind of on that, I'm kind of curious, just talking about food and the food pyramid. There's been a lot of talk about that recently in the news. And I appreciate that, because there's less of the sugars and carbs. There's more focus and emphasis on protein. But they've also they've been talking more about, we need to prioritize mental health and addiction. And I was wondering if you could maybe speak a little bit to that, because I know you have a little bit more insight on what's been going on recently.
I'd be glad to. I was just thinking about the place in this. You asked about how this evolved, and part of the evolution was the introduction in the very late 1980s of the first SSRI, antidepressant. And it was the first of, many, probably 15 others, various companies introducing their own and competing and winning as the medical profession jumped on board, completely inexperienced with dealing with mood problems. The general practitioner was handing out antidepressants. And
Yeah.
that's certainly been part of the evolution, because I had to admit to myself in the 1990s that there were some benefits from SSRIs. I was completely unwilling to do that until one of my clients who had a very serious eating disorder for years and a mood disorder as part of it, suddenly she was in recovery in our program. But it turned out that we were not evaluating her mood adequately, and she was still experiencing some depression. And so, kind of in secret, she went to see a psychiatrist. Her mother took her to see a psychiatrist, and she got on to Prozac, and she felt better. And it was obvious that she was better. At that time, the nutrient that the brain needs to make its natural antidepressant, serotonin, which is the name of the neurotransmitter that provides us with all shades of depression relief, wasn't available. When Prozac came out, it did not sell well. And that was because the amino acid needed to make serotonin, which is called tryptophan, was widely known and used, even in the psychiatric profession. They just weren't interested in a drug that did what the nutrient was doing so beautifully already. And so, in coordination, of course, with the FDA, and this is a long story that I won't go into at this point, but maybe another time, the pharmaceutical industry was able to ban the use of tryptophan in the United States for 15 years. And that was long enough for the antidepressant medications to grab hold. And by the time it was released in about 2005, for, over-the-counter consumption again, all the doctors, psychiatrists, general practitioners were completely convinced about antidepressant drugs. And so that's part of the evolution, because the antidepressant drugs, although especially initially being able to provide some improvement for a lot of people, there were also so many side effects. And one of them is weight gain. And we're talking about millions of people on these drugs battling completely unnecessary weight gain, in addition to starting to eat the cuisine of the food industry, which only added to the problem.
So you're saying that before, prior to SSRIs really launching into our world, we were using amino acids and tryptophan to
Yes,
great success.
that's a really important point in this evolution. Physicians in the country and lay people were using amino acid supplements by that time, about the same time, certainly in the early 80s and beyond. So the source of these amino acid supplements, where do they come from? Who decided to make them and why? Well, the source of all of the progress that that we'll be talking about throughout this interview is the field of neuroscience, which was new in the 70s. And everyone had access to the research. So that means the pharmaceutical industry had access to it and was building its SSRIs, and the nutrition industry had access to it and was importing amino acids that the neuroscience researchers were discovering were the primary source of the neurotransmitters that created positive mood. So everybody had access to it at the time. And it was a wonderful period of tremendous excitement. And the information was so extraordinary because it was so simple and easily applied. These neuroscientists discovered, to their amazement, really, that our natural antidepressant, our natural tranquilizer, our natural stimulant, our natural painkiller, all of these brain neurotransmitters were constructed from very simple protein constituents, single amino acids. So that meant, that was heaven for the nutrition industry and for the country. It was a marvelous time until the pharmaceutical industry and the nutrition industry collided, and the power was with the pharmaceutical industry.
That's crazy. I feel like it's so close to like an alternate reality where had that whole situation not happened and tryptophan hadn't been wrongly banned, and the story's in Mood Cure, but it was wrongly banned. It's so strange to me that everyone might know about amino acids if this was widely known, which is our job today, getting this information out today. But yeah, if you wouldn't mind circling around and kind of explaining a little bit, why is mental health and addictions, why is this kind of coming back up right now in the US anyway? We're talking about it more and trying to find solutions to that. Could you kind of talk us through that a little bit?
I'd love to get back to that because it's very exciting. We have an extraordinary Secretary of Health and Human Services who himself, he's very open about this, experienced, a nightmare of 14 years of addiction, and a great deal of mental anguish involved. So he's very interested in our mental health as well as our physical health and in providing new solutions. Now, why do we need new solutions? And the reason is that the solutions we have just don't work very well. And people are becoming very disillusioned, for example, with SSRIs. They're using more than one, and they're still not getting the relief that they should be getting. And so he is turning to the world of nutrition, in a big way, as you mentioned, with the food pyramid actually resembling our traditional diets worldwide. What are these simple, healthful foods that are, thank God, still available? And the most recent development, there's been a lot of attention to autism, but he's been talking from the very beginning, the beginning of his taking office, about the incidence of mental illness in children and teens and adults, and how, this is the first time we're hearing openly about how much worse it's gotten. He has a particular interest in the plight of those who become addicted in this country, which has also become enormous. And there's a huge private industry, been treating it since the 1980s, and more and more government-funded agencies and programs nationwide as well, trying to deal with the problem. But like our mental health, our ability to withstand or recover from addiction has been impervious. We have not responded to anything. And in the case of addiction, the blame is typically put on the addict, that they aren't, they're not trying hard enough and so forth. They're not committed. They're not motivated. But the truth is that the programs themselves are just not meeting the need because they haven't understood the need, and because actually meeting the need would be detrimental to profits. And unfortunately, that profits rule when it comes to private addiction treatment, at least in the corporate programs. But ignorance is kind of the overriding problem. They just haven't known where the source of addiction, where do these cravings come from that become so strong that, even the will to live is eclipsed by them, let alone the quality of life. Um, and so there's been, just in the last month, an initiative to take a completely new look at addiction treatment. And the leadership is coming from a very interesting quarter. The actual head of this new imperative is a man with a PhD in theology, who is a recovering addict himself. And his primary interest prior to his elevation here has been creating a support system for addicts in the prison system, so that, and most of whom are addicts, committing crimes as part of their addiction.
That's a huge need.
It is a huge need, and he sees where it can be accomplished, that it's really helpful. But in the big picture, it's a drop in the bucket. And he has been very interested in hearing about the the nutritional possibilities that have been really established in programs all over the country uh, since the late 1980s in particular. So he's actually made a commitment that this nutritional technology will be part of this new approach to treatment going forward. His name is Monty Burks, for those of you who are interested in looking him up. So he's just setting up his office, but when he got the information about nutritional recovery from addiction, he dropped everything and made an appointment to find out about it. And then brought in one of the really established bureaucrats in the addiction field in the government to then have follow-up meetings. So I think this is, a wonderful door opening for demonstrating the effect that we can have if we restore, the needed nutrients to the needed parts of the brain.
Oh, that's incredible. And I mean, you have so much experience with addiction recovery and using amino acid and nutrient therapy for addiction recovery. Um, and I mean, we could do a whole nother episode on that alone. I'd love to, because we're talking so much about amino acids already. I'd love to explain to our audience. Sometimes people don't even know what are amino acids, or we know what it is, like we learn about it in school, building blocks of protein, but what are we talking about when we're talking about using amino acids for mood? Would you mind just explaining real quick what amino acids are as far as supplementation?
Well, fortunately for us, the supplement industry has been able to create nutrient supplements composed of exact replicas of very specific amino acids. So the antidepressant amino acid tryptophan is available as an individual concentrate, really, made from enzymes. So they're actually biologically identical to the basic amino acids that humans require as well. Um, so we have access to all 20 of the amino acids that exist. And what we've found in our work to restore optimal mood health is that only 5 are needed for this enormous task that has, occasioned so much suffering. To reverse it is really a very simple matter. And it's based on this technology that was developed decades ago. And the country that developed it was Japan.
And so you're saying that amino acids, we can use specific extracts. So we can isolate these and we can use these to support different parts of our brain. Let's go into that right now. Would you mind talking about the 5 mood centers of the brain and explaining to us how you have pioneered using amino acids to help people with anxiety, depression, overwhelm, stress, sleep issues? I mean, the list goes on. And we just mentioned addiction briefly and cravings. We're going to kind of focus more on the mental health and the mood health side of it, but it has applications for pretty much, I like to think, any problem you have, amino acids can probably fix them. So let's go ahead and talk about those 5 mood centers.
It might help to know that I discovered them, their therapeutic value, amino acid supplements, in the mid 1980s. And at that time, I was the director of outpatient programs for an addiction treatment center that was, and I had expanded it into 3 counties, primarily treating the adolescents who were suddenly stricken with addiction as teenagers. So I had already been in the addiction treatment world for about 6 years by that time. and had worked with a lot of alcoholics. But in the mid 80s, we were starting to work with cocaine addicts. And by 1985, we were faced with an epidemic of crack cocaine addiction that was so virulent that no program in the country was able to address it. All of the inpatient programs, which were thriving, it was a new industry at that time, were seeing their crack cocaine patients disappearing within 24 hours, even when they made a hefty deposit that was non-refundable to try and keep them. And the mood problems that they had without crack cocaine were extraordinary. I mean, the tremendous depression and fatigue. It was unbearable. We were having the same experience. Our residential program, couldn't keep crack cocaine addicted people in residence, so we couldn't help them. And it was just at that time that I discovered the neuroscience of mood, and the neuroscientist who was doing the studies that most interested us in the addiction field was fascinated by the neuroscience of the addicted brain. And he created a supplement that provided a single amino acid, which in the first study had the most extraordinary benefits. And what they found was that instead of a 40% AWOL rate within the first 10 days, they had a 4% AWOL rate overall. You can imagine when I saw that study, the next thing I did was to contact our nutritionist. I had hired nutritionist hoping that maybe an improved diet would help, but it didn't. But she happened to know something about nutrient supplementation. And I said, research it. You have a week. If it's safe, we're going to start it next week. We have a new client who is not homeless. He is somehow managing to keep a job, but he's using a lot and it's destroying his family, and but he's very motivated to try anything. And so a week later, we were handing him a bottle of the amino acid called Tyrosine, which is the direct fuel for our naturally energizing, motivating, focusing neurotransmitter. The generic name is catecholamine, but there are several of them. Dopamine is one, norepinephrine is another. So we gave him the bottle. We told him to take 4 500 milligram capsules 3 times a day. And we made an appointment for the following week. And when he walked in the following week, he said, "This is the first time in 5 years where I haven't used crack."
Stop. This is a true story.
This is a
Oh
true
my
story.
gosh. Oh my
This is a
goodness.
true story. And I talk about, clients like him in the mood cure. But that was, that was the wake up call. This was a gold mine of some sort. I knew it was a gold mine for our stimulant addicts. We used it with our methamphetamine addicts that were starting to proliferate. By the way, the National Institute on Drug Addiction has declared that they have no cure for methamphetamine addiction or cannabis addiction. And what they don't admit is that they don't have very good solutions for anything, but nothing at all. I appreciate the honesty of that department at this time. So we had nothing but excitement about pursuing Dr. Blum, Kenneth Blum, who was the neuroscientist who cracked the crack cocaine epidemic. And he continued to do research in alcohol addiction, and there was even better response at that point. And then later on in the 90s, he did research in food addiction. And at those for those problems, he needed to use 4 different amino acids. So when we wonder, why are we food addicted? Why are we gaining this weight? Why can't we stop? Well, you can see right there that a food-addicted brain is deficient in 4 neurotransmitters. A crack cocaine addict is only deficient in 1. And the same is true of mood. Various negative moods result typically from a combination of deficiencies. We may not have enough of our natural stimulants to feel optimistic and excited about life, but maybe we should go back at this point to talk about the natural antidepressant. So our natural antidepressant is neurotransmitter is called serotonin, and the nutrient, as we mentioned before, that feeds it directly is called tryptophan. So tyrosine feeds the catecholamines, tryptophan feeds serotonin. So we've got half of our neurotransmitters covered with 2 amino acids that have direct effects on the brain, and they demonstrate their effects within minutes. So we're talking about less than 5 minutes, and it might be a good time to tell people to look at my YouTube channel where they'll see demonstrations of amino acids being provided and how quickly the volunteers start reporting the changes that they're experiencing. I discovered that tryptophan and a very similar amino acid, 5-hydroxytryptophan, they became available in the late 90s. And that's when we were able to provide something besides antidepressant recommendations. And again, we did very quick trialing of a few clients, saw the tremendous benefit, and, dusted off our hands. Well, we've got depression taken care of now. So for a psychotherapist, I'm talking about magic. And at any rate, moving on, we still had anxiety and stress levels through the roof, and there really was no safe medication. The only medication available still are benzodiazepines, which are tranquilizers that are incredibly addictive, are almost impossible to withdraw from in a lot of cases. We have solutions now, but it's still a challenge to withdraw from the benzos. But one of the key factors in replacing a benzo is the use of the amino acid, one of the amino acids that creates natural relaxation and stress relief. The first of those amino acids, there are only a few, and they all target the same part of the brain, which is the source of our tranquility. And it accomplishes that by neutralizing adrenaline. So stress is literally adrenaline, and GABA, gamma aminobutyric acid, is the neurotransmitter that neutralizes it, so that we have a balance, an appropriate balance. So we can handle stress when it comes up with a shot of adrenaline, but we're not stuck with it. We're not, literally stressed 24/7 by it, as we started to be. So now we can provide 3 of the 4 answers to prayer when it comes to mood.
That's incredible. And you really feel it. Like GABA was the first amino that I tried before. I mean, probably 5 years ago now, but it was the first one. And it sold me on amino acid therapy because I just took 1 tablet lozenge. And I don't think I realized how stressed I was until I took it. I felt so like, oh, is this how I'm supposed to feel? Like, and I don't mean in a way where I'm so like sedated. You know what? It's not like I was sedated. I didn't feel tipsy or like so out of it. It was just like, oh, this is probably how I'm supposed to actually feel, like where I don't have that hamster wheel of worry and overwhelm and stress.
Well, GABA is available, as you say, in lozenge form and, capsules, whatever, and at whatever dose. Actually, very low doses of GABA can be very, very effective. Probably the lowest dose available is about 100 milligrams. And in a lozenge form, it absorbs so much better. Some people do need a lot more, and 500 milligrams is available for people who at least initially, need a lot more. So why don't we move on now that we've, given people back their energy and vitality and their ability to be relieved of stress and worry. Let's go to our final challenge, which was restoring our natural ability to experience pain and relief from pain. So that life presents us with pain and it's inevitable, but there are degrees of emotional pain that are intolerable and that go on too long. One of the reasons that we're suffering an enormous increase in the number of opiate addicts in the country is not just because of the supply of fentanyl, but because we're so vulnerable. We need pain relief so much. It turns out that the neurotransmitter that transmits pain relief is very large. It's the largest one. It requires more amino acids. It's harder to build and maintain. And so this vulnerability to pain has just increased as our dietary supply of amino acids has deteriorated. There is an amino acid that is able to preserve what we have and what we're building. And there may be a tendency among people who get addicted to opiate drugs to make too much of an enzyme that actually destroys endorphins. So the body is always making neurotransmitters and destroying them and keeping a balance going. And this amino acid called D-phenylalanine is an unusual one, and it keeps the balance in our favor of allowing us to build up endorphins rather than destroying them too rapidly. And again, it takes effect in minutes so that we have an unbelievable ally when emotional pain is a chronic problem. For example, probably the majority of people that come to us who have food addictions talk about food as being their friend, that comfort food is what they're looking for. So they're telling us in their own language that their natural endorphin levels are low. And when they trial the DPA, within minutes, those cravings are gone because they are experiencing their natural ability to be comforted and to love something besides chocolates.
Yeah, because the craving's there. If you have low endorphins, it can be chocolate, things like dough and bread, and I've certainly experienced that. And there's a reason why, you have a breakup or something happens and you just want to go straight for the ice cream and the dairy. It's very sedating, isn't it? It's very calming, and the endorphins, that's a good sign too that your endorphins are low, and that's really important to support that. I just think that's so interesting. I've tried that before too. Like, oh, I have a craving for a piece of toast, which, whatever. But then I take and then, the DPA, and then that craving just goes away. So it's really interesting to see like, oh, that's just that's a low neurotransmitter rather than a true, I need this food and this is nourishing for me. I think that one's so fascinating.
Well, now we've done it. We have restored our mood chemistry.
And I don't know if it's clear to people that this is so like how powerful this actually is. I want to give an example. So I had a client who had, come to me with really low moods, really low energy, low motivation. Actually, his moods had been low since he was probably, I think he said around 7 or 8. And finally, I started working with him and I had him do the mood questionnaire, which is on Julia's website. You can go on there right now at cravingcure.com and you can download that for yourself and see where you're depleted, which is right where you need to start. It's the best place to start. And so we found out, long story short, he had low serotonin, right? And he started 5-HTP. He told me, I don't even think it was 3 days, Julia. I think it was maybe 2 days. He texted me and said, I have motivation. I am getting projects done. I'm writing music. I'm doing things that I love and I care about. Even my friends are noticing. Like, they're like, dude, what's up? Anyway, it was incredible. Like the text that I received from him, he's like, I'm a different person. When it really all just comes down to, it is simple. The way that you made it, the way that you wrote the mood cure, which I have my copy right here. It's simple. You follow the steps. You can fill out the mood quiz. It's not complicated. And that's what I love about it. And I appreciate so much about you. And that's just one of my client stories. I have many. And many, family and friends. But it's just incredible to be able to pinpoint what's the mood center in your brain, or two or three or four, however many, and then being able to support those with nutrients. It blows my mind every time.
Well, you brought up a really important point in that. How do we know someone's deficient in one or more of these four magical brain sites and their fuel? We know because scientific research has demonstrated what the symptoms are when we become deficient in any of the four. And we've been able to create a very accurate deficiency questionnaire in 4 parts. And people identify with the symptoms on a scale of 1 to 10. And it's just, a 5-minute miracle, really, to be able to identify your own neurotransmitter function on a single piece of paper in 5 minutes. The thing we haven't talked about yet, you actually mentioned 5 factors a few minutes ago, and so far we've only covered 4, but there's a 5th factor, which frankly I don't do justice to in the mood cure, but there is a section on it. And if you look up hypoglycemia in the index, you can find some very nice information about how to provide adequate fuel to all 4 of these brain sites that require constant infusions of glucose, a very steady supply of glucose so that they can do their job. So it turns out there isn't a single amino acid that can supply the brain with additional glucose should the levels drop too low at any time. And that amino acid is called glutamine. So what does this have to do with mood? So the cells in the brain need a steady supply of glucose. Why is that such an issue? And the issue, again, comes back to diet. We've got a national cuisine that creates hypoglycemia just by its very nature. Highly refined carbohydrates, sweets and starches, cause a sudden increase in glucose in the bloodstream, which the body regards as an emergency, and sends out insulin to neutralize it and store it as fat in the body, leaving us, again, hypoglycemic. So we have too much, and then we have too little, and then the body helps us by putting out signals, and those signals are very uncomfortable. Hypoglycemia, in terms of mood, there are at least 20 different negative moods that hypoglycemics suffer from inattention, irritability, anxiety. It goes on and on. And there's actually a list in the mood cure of the potential symptoms of hypoglycemia.
Yeah, I think of when I'm hangry in between meals and I feel
Hungry.
irritable. I mean, definitely in the past, I've even been walking through the store and I didn't eat that day. And then I felt like I was going to have a panic attack, or I'd feel nervous and shaky and jittery. I think most people probably understand at least what it feels like to be hangry, and don't understand that that's, low glucose, high insulin in the body causes anxiety and panic.
I really would like to say something about what a miraculous molecule the amino acid glutamine is, so that in it you get this enormous bang for your buck. With glutamine, you not only get enough glucose for every cell in your body to operate, which is amazing. There's more glutamine in the bloodstream than any other amino acid because it's used in this way. But in addition to that, it has been found to be curative for the most remarkable array of health problems. During the AIDS epidemic, it was discovered that approximately 30 grams a day of L-glutamine could prevent Kaposi's sarcoma, which was the cancer associated with AIDS. Recently, one of the pharmaceutical companies has come up with a medication called Endari, and they're calling it an amino medicine. and it's just glutamine, enormously expensive for no reason. It's very helpful in recovery from diabetes as well, but not with diabetics who are on medication. They have to be off the medication. However, the most remarkable thing, and this does have a lot to do with the underpinnings of diabetes, is that um, glutamine is the primary component and the regulator of GLP-1, which is a peptide that has been duplicated in the medicine Ozempic.
A rather hot topic right now.
These medications really are just duplicates of a chain of amino acids that the body naturally is supposed to be able to create, but of course, our diet prevents that.
That's fascinating.
Isn't
So,
it?
I mean, yeah, makes me want to go take some L-glutamine right now. I love it and I use it for gut health, but ever since I've been talking with you about it, now I take it more often. When I trialed it, I noticed that like I felt more like my brain turned on and I felt more alert. It was really cool. Yeah. So it was a good sign that, I needed that. And gosh, so we've went over the amino acids that you have used and pioneered because I know it took you a while to like figure out which ones to use. I mean, you described it. You started with the tyrosine and then went to tryptophan and 5-HTP. And you've researched and you've taken so much time and everything is just I just love the way that you've done this. Very professional. You've tracked the case studies and I'm curious, this works so well for you. This has worked so well for your clinic for decades, for so many practitioners who you've trained as neuronutrient therapists. I can't help but wonder, and I think anyone listening is wondering if this is real and if this works so well and if this could work for me, why in the heck don't I know about this? Why can't I walk into Target and see this the first thing I see? Why isn't this on television? Why isn't this on YouTube and TikTok? Like, why isn't this out there? Do you have an answer to explain why this feels niche still?
Yes. I'll give you the historical progression of the suppression of this information and then talk about something that's been happening that's very interesting, which I call the dopamine hoax, just in the last 15 years or so. So um, in 1987, Prozac, the first SSRI antidepressant medication, was released, and it did not sell well. And that's because the psychiatrists in the country were familiar with the use of tryptophan. So in 1989, they were able to work with the FDA to get tryptophan banned temporarily, but that temporarily lasted for 15 years until all of the SSRIs had become established. So I made that point before, but that's the beginning of the suppression of the nutritional use of all this wonderful neuroscientific evidence that had been coming out since the 70s about how we could improve our moods. Um, in the late 1990s, Dr. Blum had published a study using the four amino acids that I've talked about today. Well, five. Glutamine was involved in addition to the other four amino acids. He had combined them in a formula for overeaters. And he'd done a study on 125 optifasters who had completed their weight loss, and they'd lost, typically 100 pounds. And they were given no instruction. They were just taken off the OptiFast product, and they did whatever they did, except that half of them took this amino acid blend every day. And at the end of a year, the half that were not taking the amino acid blend had regained all of their weight. The half that were taking the amino acid blend, and we're not talking about anything terribly strong, enough to five amino acids fit into one capsule. But even so, taking several a couple of times a day, most of them had regained none of their weight. So one of the pharmaceutical companies decided to make that formula big time. It was Schiff. And they got it into all the pharmacies in the country. And a television special about it the producers received 50,000 calls of people wanting to know where they could get their hands on it. This is, we're talking 1997. I was involved in the documentary. They interviewed a lot of our clients for it. So I know this from personal experience. And Dr. Blum, was someone that was really the hero of the amino acid therapy world, and was justified in what he did. And his study was excellent. But the pharmaceutical industry, in conjunction, I'm sure, with the food industry, created this extraordinary fear campaign. They arranged to be on a segment of 2020 in which they claimed that the tiny amount of 5-HTP was potentially dangerous, that it might perhaps cause the problem that tryptophan had caused 10 years prior. And there was no evidence of that. 5-HTP had been used in Europe for at least 15 years with no problems. But they did that sort of thing, and it culminated in a directive to all the pharmacists in the country not to carry this product. And they all complied, and they sent it back to Schiff, and Schiff had to abandon the whole project.
That's crazy. Okay, so they just kind of pushed that off the table, and then that kind of left a bad taste for amino acids, and companies, they just didn't want to sell
They didn't
them
want to risk
anymore.
it. Yeah, they
Okay.
were terrified of poisoning their customers.
Right.
So fear tactic, and it worked. So I was talking to you about the more recent suppression that I call the dopamine hoax. And that is that as the SSRIs have gotten closer to their patents running out, serotonin has disappeared from the discussion of mood improvement. The only neurotransmitter that's being talked about now, and has been for about the past 10 or 15 years, is dopamine. Now, dopamine is a neurotransmitter, and it's an important one, but it has very little influence on mood, very little direct influence on mood. And so there's been a battle between those people who want to only focus on dopamine and those who are saying, all credible scientists saying, wait a minute, we know perfectly well that dopamine has almost nothing to do with mood. It has to do with movement, programming movement, and many other things, but not mood. So the campaign has continued despite the objections. So the interest in neuroscience has been growing and growing. There are now BA programs, MA programs, PhD programs in neuroscience, but none of them are talking about all the neurotransmitters. They're just talking about dopamine.
Just focused on
And
one.
yeah. So I found this very strange, very mysterious, until just recently when I discovered that as the patents for the antidepressants targeting serotonin have run out, they're making new dopamine-targeted antidepressants that are going to be coming on the market. So that this has all been a campaign preparatory to a new excitement about a new medication.
Okay, because I do feel that everyone knows what dopamine is. I mean, we talk about dopamine detoxes when we, don't look at our phones and our devices. We talk about dopamine all the time. And that does make sense, that we're throwing that out there into the zeitgeist so we can maybe sell medications targeting that. But what you brought up was interesting because dopamine's just part of the catecholamines. It's a smaller part. There's norepinephrine and epinephrine, and, it's very interesting.
We've lost, from the conversation on, healing our negative mood epidemics, we've lost all of the keys. As far as most people know, there are no other neurotransmitters. And one of my colleagues got a PhD in psychology, and they were taught this, that dopamine was really the only neurotransmitter to pay any attention to, and that any other neurotransmitters were just made in the gut. as if the brain didn't have this huge source of neurotransmitter production.
Right, right. Oh, that's fascinating. And I'm glad you shed light on that because I think that's really important for us to be aware of, as that starts to come out and we can kind of arm ourselves with facts and with truth. So I am curious. I mean, we talked about the bad mood epidemic. Um, is it possible to undo the bad mood epidemic? I mean, if you look at the statistics, they're crazy. Like even since 2020, the statistics for anxiety and depression, the amount of time people have had to take off work, it's debilitating. Is there a possibility that we can reverse this downward mental health trajectory for ourselves and our kids and our grandkids?
We could have done it decades ago. So the really question is, can we get around the influence of the pharmaceutical industry and the food industry?
Mm.
After 2 weeks after my first book, which was also a bestseller before the Mood Cure, it came out, about 4 years before the Mood Cure, the Diet Cure. 2 weeks after it came out, I got a call from someone from one of the largest snack food companies in the country. And that tells you how closely they monitor us, and admitted everything about their food and its effects. They just wanted to know whether I thought their food was actually physically addictive, in addition to being damaged and, creating malnutrition and hypoglycemia, all kinds of problems. So this is our time because of Secretary Kennedy creating this atmosphere and all these projects to improve our diet. That's the only way that we can permanently raise children who are free of all these maladies, is to feed them properly. And that means that we ourselves have to be free from our addiction to processed food, which is the most, deadly of all addictions ever known. So we have an opportunity, and this is a country that jumps on new dietary and nutritional fads. And we can very, very quickly demonstrate how incredibly effective these things are and how quickly they take effect. I mean, just looking at my YouTube channels, volunteers experiencing amino acids, you can imagine that, all over the internet, and, at the corner pharmacy. Do you want a sample? Whatever. It would be spread like wildfire. And so that's where they start, is being free from the cravings for toxic food. And then once they're free, they have a normal appetite and they can enjoy and provide for their families the kind of
Yeah.
food that will get us back to pre-1970s mental health and physical health.
And I think that that's really beautiful that also, in your book, The Craving Cure and The Diet Cure, you talk about, hey, if you have cravings, you don't need any willpower. You can use these amino acids to give you what you need. You're not going to have cravings anymore. And that's a whole nother episode that we can maybe go into later, but it's incredible. So I think what I'd like to end with here and wrap up with is, what message would you like to give to anyone listening who just feels like, oh, I've tried medications and I've tried therapy and exercise and diets and all of the things already, Julia. Why should I give amino acids a try? Like, they probably won't work for me because I've tried everything else. What would you tell these people?
I would tell them, go to my YouTube channel. All of those people had tried all of those things before they tried the amino acids. And go to my website, because there you'll find a handbook, an amino aid handbook, that you can order with simple directions about how you can trial this safely and effectively. And you can also get your own amino acid trialing kit. And if you have any questions or are just reluctant to do something like that on your own, you can come and see us at the clinic. There's plenty of information about that on the website. There's also a list of people, and Annika is going to join the list soon, I hope, nutrition professionals and psychotherapists. So quite a group of people who, and other health professionals who have trained in amino acid therapy and can help you online, very easily.
I will link to your website. I will put all of
Thank
that in
you.
the show
Thank you
notes. So
so
it's
much.
super easy. Absolutely. Yeah. And yeah, I guess that answers. I was going to say, where can people find you? But we just talked about it, your website. So I'll link that there. And yeah, I just want to end with thank you, a personal thank you, Julia. My life has been so changed. My mental health, my energy, even just working with you in the practitioner program this year, I've learned so much already. So I just want to thank you. The world needs a million more clones of you, and I appreciate you so much. So thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, we'll talk to you next time. Thanks so much for being here today.
Bye-bye.
Thanks so much for listening to today's episode, you guys. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you are interested now in amino acid therapy and nutrient therapy for your mood health or for a loved one's mood health, you can go to nourishedbynature.co, book a free consultation with me. That's a 20-minute consultation that gives us plenty of time to go over your health goals, your health concerns, and I will help you figure out the next best step for your mood wellness. That's nourishedbynature.co. We'll see you on the next episode.